Okay, so I really liked this is question 155, and I really liked their answers as a model. I think that that works um, really, and we're going to go through it. But again, as a model, I think it works because the issue with attainable standards really is that we accept that there must be that there will be wastage. So there's an acceptance of wastage, right? You're an acceptance of wastage, an acceptance of idle time. You're being realistic, right? And this is almost like machine sort of status, really. No acceptance of any wastage. And these are outdated initial standards that are set, right? If you like, right at the beginning, and they haven't been updated and that sort of thing. So let's go to, like I said, I think they have some very good, strong answers. Um, so it's important to read through and be very clear. This is almost knowledge here. I don't think you're. This is good for just knowledge. I don't think you're going to get asked this kind of heavy written question, but I think it's important to know what's going on. So attainable really, like I said here, allows for some wastage and inefficiency, right? It accepts that. But it has to measure it. It has to know what is normal wastage and what is normal inefficiency. Ideal, perfect operating condition. So no inefficiencies, no stoppages. Um, I think almost think of a machine. That's a new machine that's working perfectly. Right. And then, of course, we have, when we say the basic standards, these were probably set a long time ago. They haven't been revised. You can see when it was set up and actively limited value, it is often out of date. And but again, it is useful to know, to have there, to sort of have as a benchmark as you're coming along, so you can have something to relate to, something to relate to. That's the first point. Then we have again us discussing it in terms of variances. So the key point here is under attainable standards, you would, well, that's fair. Whatever we're putting there already includes um, any wastage or any inefficiency what we accept. So therefore, if we have any variances, it means we should investigate why this process, if you like, has deviated. I mean, typically what's also very good is because the levels are achievable and they should motivate, it's realistic, right? And we should be able to get the best of our workers. So this is really the ideal attainable standards. Of course, I mean that's the very word attainable. Ideal standards are most, the truth is you cannot work as fast as a machine. So if you refuse to include those idle times and times of relaxation, you will always be adverse 100%. It's virtually impossible to achieve. It's how can you achieve a favorable variance? It means that your standard is wrong because we're talking about a machine. So I think sometimes it may be good to know what the optimal efficiency would be, but this is most likely to be demotivating, right? Because you're being assessed against something that is unlikely to happen. So what you tend to see some kind of dysfunction and people just being generally unhappy, if you like, or you can start seeing people manipulating results, and then you don't have what you want. You now start having the effects come out in terms of poor quality or that sort of thing. Like I said, basic standards are not helpful to anyone either because they're so set so far in the past. They haven't taken account of advances in tech or advances in the process. And so um, the problem here is you cannot really assess or motivate because people are always going to be doing usually better than basic standards, but it just means people won't really trust the budgeting system because it is out of date. So you can have actual costs be much higher than the historic standards. So generally, of course, we're going to more likely to see favorable variances, um, but what you're really trying to do is to have something to really assess variances, and this is not going to help you. So, in terms of real motivation, um, what you're not going, it may lead to, well, of course, because you're doing better, but overall, your targets are easier, and so they need a target. They need a sort of a better budget a better budget. So now let's go back to the question, and so you can see some of the figures, what was going on here. And here, what they tell us here is that flour and butter have been assessed using attainable sorry, DZ uses ideal, sorry, forgive me. They use ideal standards for flour and butter. So you're going to have issues. There's no question about it. So they use ideal standards. It's not good, right? You're going to have issues. You're going to have variances, and you're going to have manipulation of figures. They use an attainable standard for milk, and that's great. So that's perfect, right? And basic standards for dried fruit and labor. So these are just not up to date. So you can just go discuss from that point of view and maybe see what you can do to change things. So going back to that, let's look at the question. The question then gives you, I believe, oops, sorry. The question then gives you some, you've done this discussion, and it then gives you some figures, and it tells you that, yes, so I think I've discussed it says use uses standard and attainable, discuss the type of variances that may arise. Okay, great. So like I said here, you have, in terms of attainable standards, um, what you're definitely going to get, let's just come out here. They're just going through each of them. So you have a discussion. Okay, I sort of did both together. These are the types of standards that, like I said here, I think I've done A and B together. Yeah. So again, here you're likely to get. We've already talked through all of these in part B. So I sort of answered B at the same time. I almost felt you could really discuss what these are and discuss B um, at the same time. Um, yeah, we've been through this, haven't we? Um, so, but just sort of picking up on it again here. Um, all your attainable for your attainable standards. So this was milk, wasn't it? Milk. Any variances are your real price versus usage variances. They're more likely to be realistic, and you can get the best out of your workers. You can investigate that. Ideal standards, it's just going to be tricky. You'll, again, like I said, it's just really highlighting the fact that you might have some dysfunction, right? And then basic standards, you're just going to have real inflation um, changes because the cost will be much higher, most likely higher than what you said 10 years ago, right? Um, so uh, or depending, I mean, again, who knows? It doesn't matter. The point here is that so you've set some standards in the past that are much far away from the current situation. So we need some current standard, right? And that could be either way or. Okay, so let's look at the ingredients, and I think that's an important point here. So I think they ask you for some recommendations to the improvements, right? And they give you some help. So they tell you that you got this information. So the standard for flour and butter. Remember, we were using ideal standards for flour and butter before. So we were saying there wasn't going to be any wastage. Now they're telling us that actually last year 10% was wasted and 5% was wasted. And how do we get standards? We look back at past information and say, you know what, do we typically waste? You know, so think of it like this: you use um, if you're if in a perfect world you would use 90 kilograms of flour to make a big whatever project, a big cake, for example, really and truly, if what happened was that you really did need 100 kilograms and 10 kilograms wasted because they just did, because in the process and you have some kilograms, your standard should be 100. Your ideal standard is saying you should use 90 because we noticed 10 got wasted. But really, we're saying, so this is what a machine would do because a machine wouldn't do any waste. You can see where I'm going. So those ideal standards were 90. But what this is sort of saying, so really, when you say, when you standardize for 100, you say, oh, we're going to have a wastage of 10%. So 10% of this gets wasted. And so you're using 90%. Yeah. So this means if 10% was wasted, that means that 90% was useful. That means that 95% was useful. So whenever you see the ideal budget, it is 90%. Whenever you see the ideal budget for butter, it is 95%. So if you're looking for the standard, you must technically therefore, so for example, in this case, um, these prices here are at 90% of what they should be. This is at 95% of what it should be, which is why when you come here, you see here in terms of current figures represent what is required. This is 90% for flour and 95% for butter. So therefore, if I'm finding what the real cost should be, I should be allowing for £1.20 there, and for butter £2.09. Divide that by 95%. I should be allowing for £2.20. Milk is fine. Leave that alone because it's already at an attainable standard, right? So any variances there, I can actually investigate. These are credible variances. And then with dried fruit, you're told a few things. Remember, these guys haven't been, these are basic. So they're telling you there's some real changes here. What are the real changes here with dried fruit? You're told that the dried fruit is now bought and estimates that you use 8% less, but the prices are 6% higher. So you're literally adjusting that. You're literally saying, well, let's shake this up. We now use 8% less of what we were formerly doing. So that's technically we use 92% of that, but we pay an extra 6%. So you have a new value. You literally just apply the changes of inflation and usage to and exactly the same thing here. You have in labor more efficiency, maybe out of date machines. I think they said of a reduction in 14%. So you're using 86%, but you also have an increase of 10%. So you have 4.73. So you can see there we've applied the idea of attainable, ideal, and basic budgets to readapting the cost schedule for making these scones. Okay.